Some scars never heal, especially those carved into your soul by the person who promised to protect you forever. Until that horrific winter evening, I believed I was living the life I'd always dreamed of. A loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a home filled with warmth. But dreams can shatter in an instant, and mine disintegrated the moment my husband's fist connected with my face, sending me crashing into our glass coffee table. The sound of breaking glass still echoes in my nightmares. My name is Isabella Chen, and this is the story of how I fell into hell and clawed my way back out, not just for myself, but for my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, who watched it all from behind her bedroom door. The blizzard outside Boston raged with the same fury as the man standing over me. Freezing wind rattled our apartment windows, but I felt nothing except the searing pain radiating from my ribcage. Blood trickled from my forehead where glass had cut deep. I tried to scream, but fear paralyzed my vocal cords. My husband, Marcus Chen, stood above me in his expensive Italian suit, the one I'd saved months to buy him for our anniversary. His handsome face, the face I'd kissed goodbye that morning, had transformed into something monstrous. His eyes blazed with an anger I'd never seen before. "Where is it, Isabella? Where did you hide the inheritance money? My mother told me your aunt left you $80,000 when she died last month. I need that money now for my investment opportunity." My aunt's inheritance, the last gift from the woman who'd raised me after my parents died in a ferry accident when I was 8. Aunt Margaret had left me that money with explicit instructions. Use this for Lily's education and your own security. Never let anyone take this from you. "Marcus, please," I managed to whisper through the pain. "That money is in a trust fund for Lily's college. I can't access it easily, and even if I could—" "Liar!" His roar made me flinch. He grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking my head back violently. "You think I'm stupid? I know you can access it. My lawyer confirmed it. You're keeping it from me on purpose. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Everything he'd done for me? The irony would have been laughable if I weren't terrified for my life. I'd put Marcus through business school by working 2 jobs. I'd given up my own graduate program in architecture to support his career. I'd taken care of his aging mother for 3 years until she passed. I'd been the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect mother. And this was my reward? "Marcus, I'm telling the truth. The trust has legal restrictions. We'd need to—" My words cut off as his hand struck my face again. The room spun. Warm blood filled my mouth. That's when I heard it. A tiny strangled sob from across the room. My heart stopped. Lily stood in her doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her dark eyes enormous with terror. She wore her pink princess pajamas, the ones with unicorns she'd been so excited about. Her small body trembled violently. "Mommy?" Her voice was barely audible. Marcus whirled toward her, and for one horrible moment, I thought he might. "Get back in your room," he bellowed. "This is between adults. Move!" But Lily didn't move. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her cherubic face. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The paralyzing fear transformed into fierce maternal rage. I had endured so much over the past 2 years as Marcus's behavior had gradually deteriorated. The verbal abuse, the controlling behavior, the occasional shove. I'd made excuses, convinced myself it would get better, that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere. But watching my baby girl's innocence shatter before my eyes, that was a line I couldn't allow him to cross. "Lily," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "go to your room, sweetheart. Close the door and call the number Mommy taught you. Remember, the special number for emergencies. Lily's eyes met me. Despite her fear, she nodded. Once, twice, then she turned and ran to her room. I heard the lock click. Marcus laughed, a cold, cruel sound. You called the cops on me, your own husband? You'll regret that. I'll take Lily away from you. I'll tell them you're an unfit mother. I'll destroy you. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. His breath reeked of whiskey. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Isabella. I've been planning this for months. That investment opportunity, it's with Sophia Reeves. You remember her, don't you? My business partner. Sophia and I are building something real together. Something you could never understand. She appreciates my vision. She values my vision. And yes, before you ask, we have been involved for the past year. She's carrying my son, something you failed to give me. The words should have devastated me. Instead, they crystallized everything with painful clarity. This wasn't a sudden breakdown. This was calculated. He'd been planning to take my aunt's inheritance, use it to fund his new life with his mistress, and discard me like trash. I'd been nothing but a convenience, a caretaker, a financial supporter, a placeholder until something better came along. From Lily's room, I heard her small voice speaking urgently. She was calling someone, but not 911. The emergency number I'd taught her was different. It belonged to the one person I'd always been told I could trust in a crisis, though I never imagined needing to use it. Uncle James. My uncle wasn't actually related to me by blood. James Morrison had been my late father's closest friend and business partner before the accident. He'd offered to adopt me when my parents died, but Aunt Margaret had insisted on raising me herself. Still, Uncle James had remained a constant presence in my life, paying for my education, offering guidance, checking in regularly. He was also one of Boston's most successful real estate developers, and, though he rarely discussed it, had connections throughout the city's legal and business communities that ran deep. I'd always been reluctant to rely on Uncle James, determined to make my own way. Even as my marriage crumbled, I'd kept my struggles private, not wanting to burden him or admit my failure. But Lily was braver than me. She'd understood what I'd been too proud to accept. Sometimes asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Marcus's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something, and smiled. That's Sophia. She's wondering where I am. I should go. He looked down at me with disgust. Clean yourself up. We'll discuss the money transfer tomorrow. And if you think about running or doing anything stupid, remember, I'm Lily's father. I have rights. You have nothing. He stepped over me carefully, avoiding the blood, and walked toward the door. He paused, looked back. Oh, and Isabella, if you did call the police, I'll tell them you attacked me first. Who do you think they'll believe? A successful businessman or a hysterical housewife with a history of, what was it? Emotional instability. My blood ran cold. He'd been setting this up. The appointments he'd insisted I attend with his therapist over the past months, where the doctor had asked me leading questions about stress and anxiety, the prescription medication for depression he'd claimed the doctor recommended, the journal he'd encouraged me to keep about my negative thoughts. He'd been building a paper trail to paint me as mentally unstable. The apartment door slammed. Marcus was gone. I lay there on the glass-covered floor, pain throbbing through my body, and waited. I didn't know if Lily had successfully made the call. I didn't know if help was coming. All I knew was that something fundamental had broken tonight. Not just my ribs or my marriage, but my willingness to be a victim. 15 minutes passed. Then I heard it. multiple vehicles pulling up outside, car doors slamming, heavy footsteps on the stairs. Then a voice I'd known since childhood, commanding and urgent. "Isabella, Lily called me. I'm coming in." Rehook. Uncle James's arrival that night would be just the beginning. As he helped me from that blood-stained floor, neither of us knew that Marcus's betrayal ran deeper than infidelity and theft, and that the business opportunity with Sophia Reeves was actually an elaborate fraud scheme that had already victimized dozens of people. The legal war about to unfold would expose not just Marcus's crimes, but a conspiracy that reached into corners of Boston's business world I never imagined. And I would transform from victim to warrior, discovering strengths I never knew I possessed. Uncle James burst through the door with 3 people behind him, a woman in a medical coat, a stern-looking man in a dark suit, and a uniformed police officer. He knelt beside me immediately, his weathered face etched with concern and barely controlled fury. "Jesus, Isabella," he breathed, carefully examining my injuries without touching them. "How long has this been going on?" Tonight was the worst, but it's been building for months. The woman in the medical coat, Dr. Sarah Lynn, as she introduced herself, gently began assessing my wounds while photographing each injury with clinical precision. The stern man, who Uncle James identified as Attorney Robert Walsh, took notes on everything. "Where's Lily?" Uncle James asked. "Her room, locked in. She saw everything, James." His jaw tightened. "Officer Martinez, could you check on the child? Make sure she's secure." While the officer went to get Lily, Uncle James helped Dr. Lynn move me to the couch. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through my torso. "Probable broken ribs," Dr. Lynn said quietly. "Severe facial contusions, laceration on the forehead requiring stitches. She needs hospital care." "No hospital," I said quickly. Marcus said a lot of things. None of them matter now. "But we can bring a full medical team to my house if you prefer. You and Lily are coming with me tonight. This is non-negotiable." I wanted to argue, to maintain some shred of independence, but when Lily called Uncle James this night, all resistance collapsed. Lily reached for me, and despite the pain, I held her close. "You were so brave, baby. So brave." Within an hour, Uncle James had orchestrated our complete extraction from that apartment. His driver brought clothes and essentials. Dr. Lynn had treated my immediate injuries. Attorney Walsh had documented everything: the broken furniture, the blood, the shattered glass, Marcus's threatening text messages on my phone. We drove through the snowy Boston night to Uncle James' Beacon Hill townhouse, a beautiful 4-story brownstone I'd visited countless times for holiday dinners, but never imagined would become my refuge. Uncle James' housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, no relation to Marcus thankfully, had prepared a guest suite with 2 bedrooms connected by a shared bathroom. She'd even set out Lily's favorite cocoa and cookies, somehow knowing exactly what a traumatized child might need. After Lily finally fell asleep, clutching her rabbit, I found Uncle James in his study. He sat behind his massive oak desk, but he wasn't working. He was staring at a photograph on the shelf, one showing him and my father laughing at some long-ago gathering. "I should have seen it," he said without turning. "Your father would have seen it. He always could read people." "It's not your fault. I didn't want you to know. I was ashamed." "Ashamed?" He finally turned, his eyes blazing. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who should be ashamed, and he will be. I promise you that." Attorney Walsh entered, carrying a thick folder. "I've pulled preliminary information on Marcus Chen and Sophia Reeves. You'll want to see this." What he showed us over the next hour painted a picture far darker than I'd imagined. Marcus hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been systematically defrauding investors through a fake cryptocurrency venture. Sophia Reeves wasn't just his mistress. She was his accomplice, using her position at a prestigious investment firm to lend credibility to their scheme. They'd already taken nearly $2 million from various investors, promising revolutionary returns on blockchain technology. The business opportunity Marcus wanted my aunt's $80,000 for was going to fund their escape to the Cayman Islands before authorities caught up with them. "How did you find this so quickly?" I asked Walsh. He exchanged a glance with Uncle James. "Let's just say James Morrison has resources most people don't know about. When Lily called him tonight, he activated a network of contacts, private investigators, financial forensic experts, law enforcement connections. We've been building this file for the past 3 hours." "You suspected something," I realized looking at Uncle James. He nodded slowly. "About 6 months ago, Marcus approached me about investing in his venture. Something felt wrong. The numbers didn't add up, his explanations were too smooth. I declined and had someone quietly look into his background. What they found concerned me, but I had no proof of wrongdoing. I was planning to talk to you about it, but..." "You seemed happy." I didn't want to interfere. "I wasn't happy. I was just pretending. I'd convinced myself that if I tried harder, loved better, sacrificed more, he'd become the man I thought I'd married." "That's not how it works," Walsh said gently. "Abusers don't change because their victims try harder. They escalate because they enjoy the power." Over the next week, I underwent a transformation I never thought possible. Dr. Lane arranged for a full medical team to assess my injuries: 2 broken ribs, a concussion, multiple contusions, and deep psychological trauma. She recommended therapy, which I began immediately with Dr. Patricia Moore, a specialist in domestic violence recovery. Meanwhile, Walsh assembled a legal team that moved with devastating efficiency. They filed emergency restraining orders against Marcus. They froze all joint accounts. They submitted custody motions for Lily with documentation of Marcus's violence and photographs of my injuries. Most importantly, they coordinated with federal investigators who'd already been building a case against Marcus and Sophia Reeves's investment fraud scheme. Marcus's retaliation was swift and vicious. He hired an aggressive attorney who painted me as an unstable, vindictive wife trying to destroy his career. He claimed I'd injured myself and blamed him. He insisted he was a loving father being kept from his daughter by a mentally ill woman. His attorney even produced the therapy records Marcus had manipulated, documents suggesting I had depression, anxiety, and episodes of erratic behavior. But Walsh had anticipated this. He'd subpoenaed Marcus's phone records, revealing hundreds of calls and texts with Sophia Reeves, many sent during times he'd claimed to be at business meetings. He'd obtained security footage from Marcus's office building, showing him and Sophia entering together late at night and leaving in the early morning hours. Most damning of all, Walsh had traced the money. My aunt's inheritance wasn't the first Marcus had stolen from me. Over our 7-year marriage, he'd systematically drained my personal accounts, forged my signature on loan applications, and taken out credit cards in my name, accumulating over $200,000 in debt he'd hidden from me. Every penny had gone to funding his lifestyle with Sophia and bankrolling their fraudulent investment scheme. The evidence was overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, Marcus and Sophia were arrested by federal agents on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Marcus faced additional state charges for domestic violence and financial exploitation. The day of his arrest, I was sitting in Uncle James' study when Walsh called with the news. "They took him at his office," Walsh reported. "Very public. His colleagues witnessed the whole thing. Sophia was arrested simultaneously at her firm. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just exhaustion and a strange sense of unreality. What happens now? I asked. Now we focus on you and Lily, Uncle James said, entering the room with hot tea. The criminal case moves forward, but that's the prosecutor's job. Our job is to help you heal and build a new life. I don't know how to do that, I admitted. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My marriage, my life, my judgment. All of it was false. No, Uncle James said firmly. Your love was real. Your sacrifice was real. Your strength that kept you going through impossible circumstances, that was real. He was the lie, not you. As I began the long process of rebuilding my life, the truth about Marcus's crimes continued to unfold in ways that shocked even seasoned investigators. The fraud scheme went deeper than anyone suspected, involving offshore accounts, shell companies, and connections to organized crime. And Sophia Reeves wasn't just his accomplice. She was the mastermind, using Marcus as his charismatic frontman while she orchestrated everything from the shadows. The trial would expose it all. But first, I would have to face my own transformation from broken victim to survivor. And eventually, to advocate for others trapped in the same nightmare I'd escaped. 3 months after that terrible night, I stood before a full-length mirror in Uncle James's guest room and barely recognized the woman staring back. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair professionally styled, subtle makeup highlighting features that had healed from their injuries. She looked confident, composed, powerful. She looked nothing like the terrified woman who'd cowered on a glass-covered floor. "Mommy, you look like a superhero," Lily said from the doorway, and I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd felt in months. "I don't know about that, sweet pea. Just trying to look professional for court today." Today was the preliminary hearing for Marcus's criminal case. I would be testifying about the domestic violence, and prosecutors would present evidence of the fraud scheme. Uncle James and Walsh had prepared me extensively, but anxiety still gnawed at my stomach. "You're going to do brilliantly," Uncle James said, appearing behind Lily. "Remember, you're not the defendant here. You're the witness. Tell the truth, stay calm, and let the evidence speak for itself." The courthouse was packed with media and spectators. Marcus's fraud case had attracted significant attention. The charismatic businessman and his beautiful accomplice, the dozens of victims they'd swindled, the dramatic arrests. It had all the elements of a sensational story. What the media hadn't initially focused on was me, the abused wife, who'd been just another victim in Marcus's larger pattern of exploitation. But when I took the stand and calmly, clearly described what Marcus had done to me, to our daughter, to our marriage, the narrative shifted. I wasn't a supporting character in Marcus's story. I was the protagonist of my own. Marcus's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination, suggesting I'd misremembered events, that I was exaggerating due to emotional instability, that I was collaborating with prosecutors to ensure a conviction. I met his questions with steady responses. When he held up my therapy records, I explained how Marcus had manipulated me to attend sessions with a therapist who worked for him, how he encouraged me to discuss my problems, which were then documented to create an appearance of mental illness. When the attorney suggested I was motivated by money, trying to claim Marcus's assets, I looked directly at the jury. "I don't want Marcus's money," I said clearly. "I want my daughter to be safe. I want other women to know they don't have to endure what I endured. And I want justice, not revenge, but accountability." The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even Marcus's attorney seemed momentarily at a loss. The prosecution then presented evidence of the fraud scheme, and the scope was staggering. Marcus and Sophia had operated their scam for nearly 3 years, creating fake investment opportunities, forged documents, and phantom companies. They targeted vulnerable people, recent retirees, widows, small business owners, people who trusted them with life savings. My aunt's $80,000 would have been their final score before fleeing the country. Sophia was already pregnant and had purchased property in the Cayman Islands under a false identity. During a break, Walsh pulled me aside with news. Sophia's attorney has approached us with a deal. She's willing to testify against Marcus in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claims he was the driving force, that she was manipulated by him. I laughed bitterly. That's rich. He blamed me for being controlling and difficult. Now she's claiming he controlled her? The prosecution isn't buying it, Walsh assured me. Evidence shows she initiated the fraud scheme before even meeting Marcus. She recruited him as her frontman because he was charming and credible. If anything, she manipulated him, not the other way around. As the hearing concluded, the judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Marcus and Sophia would remain in custody, their bail revoked due to flight risk. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Leaving the courthouse, I was ambushed by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward me, questions shouted from all directions. Mrs. Chen, how do you feel about your husband's arrest? Did you know about the fraud scheme? Will you stand by him? Uncle James and his security team moved to shield me, but I stopped them. I turned to face the cameras, took a breath, and spoke. My name is Isabella Chen. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and financial abuse. I'm speaking today not for revenge or attention, but because staying silent protects abusers and endangers victims. What happened to me happens to countless women every day, and most stay silent because they're ashamed or afraid or convinced it's somehow their fault. I'm here to say, it's not your fault. You deserve better. You deserve safety, respect, and dignity. And there are people who will help you if you find the courage to ask. The clip went viral within hours. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with supportive messages from other survivors sharing their own stories. Domestic violence organizations contacted me asking if I'd be willing to speak publicly, to share my experience, to advocate for policy changes. It was overwhelming and terrifying and somehow exactly what I needed. Uncle James, watching the media coverage that evening, shook his head in wonder. Your father would be so proud. You've taken the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something meaningful. I don't feel particularly meaningful, I admitted. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days. That's what courage is, he said, not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Over the following months, as the trial approached, I began building a new life. I enrolled in a graduate program to finish my architecture degree, something I'd abandoned years ago for Marcus's career. I started therapy not just to process trauma, but to understand myself better, to figure out who I was beyond being Marcus's wife or Lily's mother. I also connected with a local domestic violence shelter, initially just volunteering a few hours weekly, but I quickly realized I wanted to do more. Using a small portion of my aunt's inheritance, which had finally been released from legal limbo, I established a fund to provide emergency legal services for abuse survivors. So many women stay in dangerous situations because they can't afford attorneys. I had you and Walsh and resources. Most don't. I want to level that playing field. The Isabella's Hope Fund launched quietly, but word spread quickly. Within weeks, we'd helped a dozen women obtain restraining orders, file for custody, or escape violent relationships. Each thank you note I received, each success story, reinforced my conviction that my suffering hadn't been meaningful. It had prepared me to help others. Lily, meanwhile, was blossoming. Therapy was helping her process what she'd witnessed, and the stability of Uncle James's home, the routine, the safety, the love, was allowing her childhood to resume. She'd made friends at her new school, joined a soccer team, and started smiling again. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she asked me, "Mommy, are you happy now?" It was such a simple question, but it struck deep. Was I happy? I was healing, surviving, building something new, but happy? "I'm getting there, sweet pea," I answered honestly. "Some days are harder than others, but yes, I think I'm starting to be happy. Are you?" She considered this seriously, then nodded. "Yeah, I like it here with Uncle James. I like that you smile more now, and I like that Daddy can't hurt you anymore." "He can't hurt you either," I reminded her. "You're safe. We both are." "I know," she said, snuggling into her pillow. "Because you're brave. You saved us." Later, alone in my room, I replayed her words. You saved us. For so long, I'd viewed myself as weak for staying, for enduring, for not seeing the warning signs sooner. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe surviving took its own kind of strength. Maybe enduring until the right moment to escape wasn't weakness, but strategy. And maybe, just maybe, I was exactly as brave as my daughter believed I am to be. The day Marcus's therapy record leak hit the news, I was at Lily's soccer game. My phone started buzzing incessantly. Texts from Walsh, Uncle James, friends I hadn't spoken to in years, even reporters requesting comment. The headlines were brutal. Abuse accusers' mental health records raise questions, and Chen's wife, unstable or victim. And worst of all, did Isabella Chen fabricate domestic violence claims? I felt physically ill reading them, sitting on those aluminum bleachers while Lily chased a soccer ball across the field, oblivious to the media storm erupting around us. Walsh called. "This is illegal as hell, leaking sealed medical records. We're filing motions immediately, and Marcus's attorney could face disbarment, but damage is done. We need to control the narrative." "How?" I asked, watching Lily score a goal and turn to me with a radiant smile, waving enthusiastically. I waved back, forcing my own smile. "We fight back, publicly. Hold a press conference, tell your full story, show them who you really are. Or," he paused, "we can pursue this quietly through legal channels and keep you out of the spotlight." The choice was mine. Hide and let Marcus's team control the story, or step into the fire and fight. I thought about all the women who'd contacted me after my courthouse statement, sharing their own stories of abuse, thanking me for speaking up. I thought about the Isabella's Hope Fund and the women it was helping. I thought about Lily, who'd called me brave. "Set up the press conference," I said. 2 days later, I stood before a room full of cameras and reporters. Uncle James stood on my right, Walsh on my left. On the podium before me was a thick folder containing irrefutable evidence, medical reports, photographs of injuries, police reports, witness statements, financial records showing Marcus's theft. "My name is Isabella Chen. I'm here today to address the illegal leak of my confidential medical records and to set the record straight about what happened in my marriage." I walked them through everything. How Marcus had insisted I see his therapist. How that therapist had asked leading questions and documented my responses in ways that suggested mental instability. How Marcus had used those records to threaten me if I ever tried to leave. This is a common tactic of abusers. They manipulate therapy sessions to create documentation of their victims' supposed mental health problems. It serves two purposes. It makes the victim doubt their own sanity, and it provides ammunition if the victim tries to escape or seek help. Then I opened the folder. One by one, I presented evidence that Walsh and Uncle James's investigative team had compiled, medical reports from the night of the assault, time-stamped and photographed, a recording of Marcus's threatening voicemail from that evening, his slurred words promising to destroy me if I didn't cooperate, financial records showing his systematic theft of my assets. Marcus Chen is a master manipulator. He manipulated his investors, his business associates, his mistress, and yes, he manipulated me. But I'm not mentally unstable. I'm not a liar. I'm a survivor. And every woman watching this who's been told she's crazy, who's been gaslighted into doubting her own reality, who's been threatened into silence, I want you to know your truth matters. Your experience is valid, and there are people who will believe you. The press conference went viral even faster than my courthouse statement. The narrative shifted dramatically. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't the sympathetic businessman victimized by a vindictive wife, but a calculating abuser who'd systematically destroyed multiple lives. 3 days after the press conference, I received a strange email to my personal account, one that very few people had access to. The message was brief. You're being used. James Morrison isn't who you think he is. Marcus isn't the only villain in this story. We need to talk. A friend. I showed it to Walsh. He traced the IP address to a coffee shop downtown, but the sender had used a VPN to mask their true location. The account was clearly fake, created that same day, no other activity. Ignore it, Walsh advised. Classic manipulation tactic. They're trying to create doubt, turn you against your support system. But something about the message nagged at me. What if there was truth in it? Over the next week, I received 3 more messages from different anonymous accounts. Each one suggested Uncle James had ulterior motives, that he was using my case to settle old scores with Marcus's family, that there were secrets about my father's death I didn't know. I finally confronted Uncle James in his study. Tell me the truth. Is there something I don't know about you and Marcus, about my father's death? He closed his eyes, sighed deeply, and when he opened them again, they were filled with old pain. I was hoping you'd never have to know this. Yes, there's history I haven't shared. My heart sank. What history? Marcus's father, David Chen, was your father's business partner before I was. They had a construction company together, and David embezzled from it, nearly bankrupted your father. Your dad discovered the theft, and the stress contributed to the distraction that caused the ferry accident. David Chen essentially destroyed your father financially and indirectly contributed to his death. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Why didn't anyone tell me? We decided you didn't need to carry that burden. You were only 8 years old, and when you met Marcus years later, we had no reason to connect him to David Chen. Marcus used his mother's maiden name professionally, and we didn't realize the connection until after you were married. And when you did realize it, I watched you carefully. I wanted to tell you, but you seemed happy, and I had no evidence Marcus was anything like his father. I thought maybe the sins of the father wouldn't be visited on the son. He looked away. I was wrong. I should have told you immediately. The anonymous messages are right, I said slowly. You do have ulterior motives. No, he said firmly. My motive is protecting you because I failed to protect your father. Yes, there is satisfaction in seeing David Chen's son face justice. I won't deny that. But everything I've done has been for you and Lily, not for revenge. Who's sending these messages? I asked. I have a theory, he said grimly. Sophia Reeves. She's trying to divide us, create doubt, weaken your testimony before trial. She knows if you doubt me, you might doubt the prosecution's case. Walsh confirmed Uncle James' theory 2 days later. His investigators traced the messages to Sophia's attorney's office, specifically to a paralegal who'd been having an affair with one of Sophia's cousins. The messages were a coordinated campaign to undermine my credibility by destroying my trust in Uncle James. She's desperate, Walsh explained. The trial starts in 2 weeks, and the evidence against her is overwhelming. Creating chaos is her only strategy. The trial itself was grueling. I spent 3 days on the stand, detailing Marcus's abuse, his financial theft, his lies. I faced aggressive cross-examination from both defense attorneys, who painted me as vindictive, opportunistic, mentally unstable. But the evidence was undeniable. Medical experts testified about my injuries. Financial experts traced the stolen money. Other victims of Marcus and Sophia's fraud scheme testified about their manipulation tactics. Federal agents presented evidence of the shell companies, forged documents, and planned flight to the Cayman Islands. Most damning was the testimony from Marcus's therapist, who, when threatened with perjury charges, admitted Marcus paid him to document my mental instability and had dictated much of what appeared in my records. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Chen was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. He received an additional 5 years on state charges for domestic violence and financial exploitation to be served consecutively. 23 years total. Sophia Reeves, despite her attempts to shift blame onto Marcus, received 12 years. The judge specifically noted that her role as mastermind and her attempts to manipulate witnesses, including me, warranted a harsh sentence. I felt no joy when the verdicts were read. No triumph, just a profound sense of relief and closure. It was finally, truly over. After sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps with Uncle James, Walsh, and Lily, who'd insisted on being there for the verdict, despite my reservations. 18 months after the trial, I stood outside the Federal Correctional Facility where Marcus was serving his sentence. My hands trembled slightly as I signed the visitor log, but my resolve remained steady. Dr. Moore, my therapist, had questioned whether this visit was wise. "You don't owe him closure," she'd said. "You've already healed tremendously. Why risk reopening wounds?" "It's not for his closure," I'd explained. "It's for mine. There are questions only he can answer, and I need to hear them directly from him." The visiting room was stark. White walls, metal tables bolted to the floor, the smell of industrial cleaner barely masking more unpleasant odors. Marcus shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his once immaculate appearance now haggard and diminished. Prison had aged him a decade in just over a year. He sat across from me, not meeting my eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Why did you come?" he finally asked, his voice flat and lifeless, so different from the charismatic charm that had first attracted me. "To understand," I said simply, "not to forgive or reconcile, but to understand." "Why me, Marcus? Of all the women you could have targeted, why did you choose me?" He laughed bitterly. "You really don't know? Uncle James never told you?" "Told me what?" "That your father and my father were business partners. That your father destroyed my dad's life, drove him to bankruptcy and alcoholism. My father died when I was 16, broken and penniless because of what your father did to him." I felt cold wash over me. "That's not what happened. Your father embezzled from their company. My father discovered it." "That's James Morrison's version. My father's version was that your father set him up, framed him for embezzlement to steal the company for himself. My mother spent her whole life bitter, poor, humiliated. She made me promise I'd get revenge someday. So you found me, deliberately targeted me, married me, all for revenge against my dead father?" "At first, yes," he admitted. I tracked you down, engineered our chance meeting at that company party, played the struggling but ambitious guy you'd fall for. The plan was simple. Marry you, take everything you had, destroy you financially and emotionally, then disappear. My mother would finally have justice. The betrayal went even deeper than I'd known. Our entire relationship had been a lie from the very first moment. But then, I pressed, sensing there was more. It got complicated. You were so trusting, so genuine. And Lily, I didn't plan on having a kid, but when she was born, something changed. For a while, I thought maybe I could actually have a normal life, that I could let go of my mother's vendetta. So what happened? Why did the abuse start? My mother got sick, terminal cancer. On her deathbed, she made me promise again that I'd finish what I'd started. She died believing I would avenge my father. He finally looked up and his eyes were empty. And then I met Sophia. She saw what I was trying to do with you, and she had her own schemes. She convinced me we could combine forces. Take your money, take your aunt's inheritance, use it all to fund a bigger con. She made it seem logical, righteous even. But it wasn't. It was just cruelty and greed. Yeah, he agreed quietly. I know that now. And here, with nothing but time to think, I know exactly what I am. A coward who blamed others for his own failures. A monster who hurt an innocent woman and her child because of a grudge that had nothing to do with them. Did you ever love me? I asked, hating myself for needing to know. He was silent for a long time. I don't know. I wanted to hate you, but you made that difficult. You were kind when I was cruel. You stayed when I gave you every reason to leave. You loved me despite everything. He paused. Maybe I did love you in whatever twisted way I'm capable of love, but I loved my resentment and my mother's approval more. The visit lasted an hour. Marcus told me everything. How he'd researched my family, how he'd cultivated our meeting, how Sophia had approached him with the fraud scheme, how he manipulated the therapy sessions, how he planned to disappear to the Cayman Islands with Sophia and their son, leaving me with nothing. For what it's worth, I'm glad you got out. I'm glad Lily got away from me. I would have destroyed you both eventually. You were stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I was always strong, I corrected him. You didn't make me strong, Marcus. You made me realize strength I already possessed. I left the prison and drove directly to Uncle James's townhouse. He was in his study, as usual, working on development plans for a new affordable housing project. I went to see Marcus, I said without preamble. Why? He looked up sharply. To hear his version of events. To understand. I sat across from him. He told me about his father, about your version versus his mother's version of what happened between our fathers. Uncle James set down his pen carefully. And what do you want to know from me? The truth, the complete, unvarnished truth. He was quiet for several minutes, gathering his thoughts. Then he told me a story I'd never heard before. Not the sanitized version meant to protect the grieving 8-year-old, but the complicated, messy reality. Yes, David Chen had embezzled from the company, but my father had been complicit in some questionable business practices too. Nothing illegal, but ethically gray. When my father discovered David's theft, he had a choice: report it publicly or handle it quietly. He chose to report it, which destroyed David professionally, but also exposed their company's problems, nearly bankrupting my father too. Your father wasn't perfect, Uncle James said. He was a good man who made some mistakes and then tried to do the right thing when those mistakes caught up to him. David Chen's family saw him as a villain, but from your father's perspective, he was choosing honesty over covering up crimes. So both versions are partially true, I realized. Most family feuds are like that, Uncle James agreed. Two sides, both believing they're the wronged party, both carrying grievances across generations. Marcus's mother poisoned him with bitterness, and he poisoned your marriage with it. The cycle only ends when someone chooses to break it. I choose to break it, I said firmly. I won't carry this forward. When Lily grows up and asks about her father, I'll tell her the truth. Not a demonized version or a sanitized version, but the complicated truth. And I'll make sure she understands that she's not responsible for his sins, or mine, or anyone else's. She gets to write her own story. Uncle James smiled, and I saw relief and pride in his expression. Your father would be proud of the woman you've become. Over the next year, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days in my marriage. My memoir, Shattered and Whole, was published and became a surprising bestseller. I spoke at conferences, gave interviews, and connected with thousands of survivors who shared their own stories. The Isabella's Hope Fund expanded to 7 cities, helping hundreds of women escape abuse and rebuild their lives. We provided legal services, emergency housing assistance, job training, and therapy, everything I needed and was fortunate enough to have access to through Uncle James. I finished my architecture degree and started my own firm specializing in affordable housing design. My first major project was a residential complex for domestic violence survivors transitioning to independence. Beautiful, secure, dignified homes where women and children could start over. And, yes, I met someone. Not through dating apps or blind dates, but organically, working on a collaborative project between my firm and a nonprofit he directed. Daniel Rivera was a social worker who ran a men's domestic violence intervention program, teaching abusers to break their own cycles of violence. He explained on our first coffee meeting. I spend my days with Marcus Chens, men who were abused as children and became abusers as adults. Men who watched their fathers hit their mothers and learned that's how you handle conflict. I try to interrupt that pattern and teach them different skills. That must be frustrating work, I said. It is. Most don't change. But the ones who do, the ones who genuinely commit to being better fathers, better partners, those success stories make it worthwhile. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. Daniel understood trauma in ways most people couldn't. He never pushed, never made assumptions, never expected me to be over it on any particular timeline. Healing isn't linear, he told me once. Some days you'll feel strong and capable. Other days, something will trigger you and you'll feel like you're back in that apartment. Both are okay. Both are part of the process. 2 years after my divorce, Daniel and I got married. A small ceremony with just close friends and family. Lily was my maid of honor, beaming in her lavender dress. Daniel walked me down the aisle, tears streaming down his weathered face. The ceremony itself was simple, but meaningful. Instead of traditional vows, Daniel and I each spoke about what we learned from our pasts and how we wanted to build our future together. I promised to never make you doubt your reality, to listen when you speak, to respect your boundaries, and to show Lily every day what a healthy partnership looks like. I promise to trust again, I responded. To believe that not all love is dangerous, that vulnerability is strength, and that the past doesn't have to dictate the future. Standing there holding Daniel's hands, I thought about the Isabella who'd cowered on a glass-covered floor, convinced her life was over. I thought about how wrong she'd been. That night hadn't been an ending. It had been a violent, painful, necessary transformation. The old life burning away so something new could grow from the ashes. 3 years after the trial, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Sophia Reeves, writing from prison. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote. I don't even deserve acknowledgement. But I wanted you to know that I'm using my time here to educate myself about manipulation, abuse, and the harm I caused. I'm working with a prison program that helps women understand how they became complicit in crimes. I'm trying to become a person who, if I'm ever released, might contribute something positive to the world instead of destroying lives. I showed the letter to Daniel and Uncle James. What do you think? Should I respond? I considered it. Sophia had orchestrated so much of the pain I endured. She'd used Marcus, used me, used vulnerable investors. She'd tried to turn me against Uncle James, to manipulate the trial, to escape consequences. But she'd also been shaped by her own past. A childhood of poverty and abuse, a young adulthood of using her intelligence and beauty as survival tools in a world that taught her people were resources to exploit. I wrote back, not to forgive, not to condone, but to acknowledge her letter and wish her genuine transformation. I told her about the Isabella's Hope Fund, about the work we did helping women escape situations like mine. If you're serious about making amends, I wrote, then when you're released, do the work. Help other women avoid the path you took. Break the cycle you were part of perpetuating. She never wrote back, but 2 years later, I heard through Walsh that she'd completed several educational programs in prison and was working as a tutor for other inmates. Small steps, perhaps, but steps nonetheless. On Lily's 10th birthday, we had a celebration in the garden of the home Daniel and I had purchased, a beautiful brownstone not far from Uncle James's place. The yard was full of children laughing, adults chatting, and an overwhelming sense of joy. Uncle James sat on the patio watching the festivities with contentment. He'd aged considerably in the past few years, his health declining, but his spirit remained strong. "Come sit with me for a moment," he called to me, and I settled into the chair beside him. "Your father would be so proud," he said, as he'd said so many times before. But this time, he continued, "But more importantly, I hope you're proud of yourself. Look at what you've built from the ruins. Look at the lives you've touched, the changes you've made." I looked around at the gathering, at Lily, who was confident and happy and showed no lasting trauma from what she'd witnessed, at Daniel, who was patiently explaining something to a curious child, at the friends I'd made through my advocacy work, at the life I'd created. I am proud, I realized. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. "Good," Uncle James said, squeezing my hand. "Because you're remarkable, Isabella, not despite what you survived, but because of how you transformed it into something meaningful." He passed away 6 months later, peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, I spoke about his loyalty, his wisdom, his unwavering support during my darkest hours. I spoke about how he honored his friendship with my father by protecting me, and how that protection had saved not just my life, but Lily's future. In his will, he left his entire estate to fund the Isabella's Hope Fund, ensuring it could continue operating indefinitely. "Let this be my legacy," the will stated. "Not buildings or businesses, but lives saved and futures reclaimed." Now, 5 years after that terrible night when Lily called for help, I stand in my architecture firm's office, reviewing plans for our latest project, a national network of safe houses for domestic violence survivors. The Isabella's Hope Fund has grown beyond anything I imagined, helping thousands of women escape abuse, rebuild their lives, and break generational cycles of violence. Lily's in high school now, a confident young woman who volunteers at the local domestic violence center, teaching self-defense classes to younger girls. She's talked about maybe becoming a therapist or social worker, wanting to help people the way we were helped. She's never seen her biological father again, and she's made peace with that. Daniel has been more of a father to her than Marcus ever was, and she recently asked if she could call him Dad. He cried when she asked, and so did I. As for me, I finally learned what happiness feels like. Not the performance of happiness I maintained during my marriage, but genuine contentment with who I am and the life I've built. I've learned that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up. I've learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And I've learned that the worst thing that ever happened to me became the foundation for the best things in my life. Every woman who walks through our shelter doors sees a plaque I installed in the entrance. It reads, "You are not what happened to you. You are not your worst day. You are not your trauma. You are a survivor, and your story isn't over. This is where your next chapter begins." Those words are for them, but they're also for me. A reminder of the journey from that bloodstained floor to this moment of peace and purpose. The storm broke me, yes, but in breaking, I discovered I was stronger than I ever knew. And now I spend my days helping other women discover their own strength, showing them that survival is possible, that healing is real, and that life after abuse can be not just bearable, but beautiful. This is my story. But more importantly, it's my testimony. No matter how dark the night, no matter how brutal the storm, dawn always comes. You just have to survive long enough to see it. And when you do, when you finally step into that light after so much darkness, you'll discover something remarkable. You didn't just survive. You transformed. You became someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate than you could have been without the struggle. That's not to say the abuse was worth it. It wasn't. Nothing justifies violence or betrayal. But it is to say that you are worth fighting for. Your life is worth reclaiming. Your story is worth continuing. And if you're reading this from your own dark place, wondering if escape is possible, wondering if healing exists, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, I'm here to tell you, yes, you can escape. Yes, healing exists. Yes, you will feel whole again. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it is possible. And you are worth the effort.